can feel my body cold against the concrete, but I can't seem to get enough. My mind is fixed on what it wants. I just let you beat me, looks can be deceiving. Let you get the best of me, in bed with my worst enemy. This is a no-go, I just can't take hold. This is a danger zone, back up and get me home. This is a no-go, I just can't take hold. This is a danger zone, back up and get me home. So put your hand in mine, follow me, let me waste your time. Set up feet, do some stupid shit. Take a seat, let me waste your time. Slow beats up a tower.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Lawyer's Den on the Pod TV network. I'm Nick Palavito. I'll be your moderator today. And we're going to have a very exciting topic today, which deals with a judge who was arrested for purportedly not disclosing a illegal alien in her courtroom, which has created a lot of stir among the legal profession, a stir among the judicial. Can you do things like that? Well, this is going to be a very interesting question, and of course, it's a question that we're going to bring in front of the Lawyer's Den and bring in front of lawyers. We're going to bring in Peter Bennett, our resident expert, who can help assist us with this. Peter, this looks to be a bit of a problem. As you all know, Justice Dugan was arrested purportedly for having not shown ICE this person who was a felon. According to their allegations, they sent the person who is an illegal alien through the back door of the courtroom as opposed to the front door. Now there's some video that's saying, well, maybe that didn't happen. But then you have another bigger problem. There's some video that looks like maybe that is not what happened. The ICE agents were sitting in the front and they just let the person go by. So we've got some conflicting facts. And as one person said on the video, they go, well, it depends on how you're looking at the video. But we have a bigger question is to what extent can the executive branch jump into somebody's courtroom and arrest the judge if the judge isn't doing what they're wanting? So we're going to turn it over to you, Peter, to see what your analysis of this particular situation.
All right, well, first I'm going to just start with my background. And my background is based on Reuters, which tends to lean liberal, and Fox News, which tends to lean to the right. And they both seem to agree on the facts. I don't know about somebody walking by somebody else. That would be interesting but nobody that I haven't seen much about that. I mean, maybe it's just a picture, or maybe they didn't even know who he was at the time. But here's the facts as presented by both Reuters and Fox with some different slants on it. So Judge Hannah Dugan was arrested in Milwaukee by FBI officials last month for allegedly, quote, knowingly helping an undocumented immigrant in her court evade ICE authorities and telling the officers in her court that they needed a warrant. By the way, these seem like solid facts, as reported. The indictment handed down by the grand jury one day prior accused Dugan of falsely telling federal officials in April that they needed a warrant to come into her court during a scheduled appearance by an undocumented national who was in the court on 3 misdemeanor charges. Dugan told the officers to proceed to the chief judge's office to obtain a warrant, and she then escorted Flores Ruiz, the illegal immigrant, through a side door to evade federal agents. So he may have walked by there, but I would say these facts seem pretty solid on their face that, even if he walked by them, they could not grab him because the judge was telling him what to do. So that's the background, and I have some, more of the legal arguments in a minute. What do you think so far?
Well, the thing is, it looks like you're going to see conflicting facts if you look at the video, and the video is going to be pretty powerful. The video that I saw looked like the ICE judges or the ICE people were sitting in the waiting room, which you can do in court, as the person was going into the courtroom, right, to basically maybe be sentenced or have a hearing in front of the judge. And then what happens is that He just walked on by the ICE agents, as the ICE agents just sat there doing nothing. I mean,
Well,
that's what the video is showing. And if so, we have a lot of problems with it. Okay, problem number one is, uh, this is a state court judge's room. This is not
right.
a federal detention center, and states have their own sovereignty. What is the federal government doing in the bloody state courtroom? Now, if they leave the state court, of course they can arrest them, but that's their prerogative. The other thing is, if I'm a state court judge, I don't work for the federal government. I don't have ICE telling me what to do. If ICE came up to you and said, hey, Peter, we need you to go arrest these illegal aliens. That's not your job, man. You just tell them, hey, go stick your ICE up your ICE pick.
Well, wait.
There's problems with this case. And finally, okay, it's intimidating the judiciary. I mean, if you look at it, this is the closest thing to bad management than I ever saw. So
Well,
what's
I
your,
have to
what's your
disagree
thinking?
with you on a couple points, Nick. First of all,
Sure.
I don't know the facts of when he walked by there, but again, if the judge said you cannot arrest him now, you need to get maybe he walked by them, maybe when they were suspended from arresting him because the judge said go get a warrant. So maybe some other guys went down there. A picture is not worth 1,000 words here because Reuters and Fox don't agree on the much. But when they both report the exact same words, the same story, and I've seen the story in other places, I have a few, again, the picture is just a picture. But here's the bigger issue, and this is really the key. First of all, ICE has conducted 189 courthouse arrests since President Trump returned to office. But that's not new, first of all. This isn't like, oh my gosh, they're in the courthouse. In fact, the Biden administration was roughly on a pace of about half that amount of arrests, but they did plenty of arrests in courthouse. If you're an illegal immigrant, you do not have immunity just because you walked into a courthouse. There may be a trial going on, in which case maybe the judge can say, well, you need to wait till the end of it. But there's no sanctuary city in terms of a courthouse. We're in the same country. And the bigger issue yet, though, is that some Democratic-run states, including New York, have passed laws to restrict ICE's ability to carry out immigration enforcement in or near a courthouse. So they've tried to say, okay, you can't do it, as you were saying. You can't go into a courthouse. We won't allow it. However, this, and you actually argued before the Supreme Court, so I know you're familiar with the venue of constitutional law. So I started looking into this, and what I saw from, and this was by several scholars of legal practice in terms of the Supreme Court practice. And what they said is that the federal preemption laws, which are based on the supremacy clause, are actually one of, and many said, the most used doctrine in Supreme Court practice. So basically, it comes up a lot. But when the federal government conflicts with the states, the Constitution is clear, and the Supreme Court has ruled that it is clear. Basically, the Supreme Court has said, and the Constitution says very clearly, that you can't have 50 states creating different laws and the federal government disagreeing with some of them. When both the federal government and a state disagree, it almost always goes to the federal government. And it sort of has to be that way because you can't have 50 mini countries who are disagreeing, creating different laws. You can't have 50 laws of marriage, 50 laws of immigration, 50 laws of criminal, what's a crime and what's a not, 50 borders, 50 whatever. So the federal preemption laws are clear. And as a matter of fact, we've been doing this show maybe 2 months now, and we've had a lot of cases where maybe the Supreme Court might rule one way or the other. Sometimes the Trump administration wasn't right procedurally. Sometimes they were right on solid ground. But this is, to me, the clearest case of all. Supremacy clause, preemption. I don't see any arguments where the states will ultimately be able to stop ICE from doing their job.
Yeah, but the thing is, she can't stop ICE from doing their job, but she doesn't have to do ICE's job. In other words, her job is to rule in her court relating to state law. Her job is not to become a police officer and
Oh, absolutely.
grab somebody and arrest them. So
Well-
it's those ICE agents. They're the ones, once he leaves the courtroom or she leaves the courtroom, it's their job to arrest him. And please don't blame the judge for not jumping up and arresting him and turning over to ICE. That's
Well,
not her job.
wait, that's a fine line, and we're going to run out of time.
Yeah, but
relatively
it is
soon.
a fine line. Okay, so
But
when
wait.
do you cross the line, and when does this become judicial interference? When does this become judicial intimidation? And if she's found innocent, then shouldn't these ICE agents hang and go to jail for false imprisonment, wrongful detainer? So
You're
we've got
excited
some
today.
serious problems here. And you notice,
Not
Peter,
even close.
it's not just me, it's half the legal community and almost all the judicial community has a serious problem with executive interference in the judicial branch. And that's what we're saying.
Well, what you just said can be broken down into parts. So you're right. It's not her job to go arrest an illegal immigrant, but it is also not her job to send FBI or ICE agents down the hall when they don't need a warrant to get a warrant, which was misleading, and then to show the immigrant the back door. That is the definition of obstruction. Let's assume that it was a criminal wanted for murder or a criminal, forget about the illegal immigrant issue. Let's say it was a rapist or a killer or some other thing. How would it be if the judge said, you can't arrest him when they could, go down the hall, and then showed the murderer the back door? Either way, this is well beyond the scope of a judge's authority.
Hard problem with those facts. I've been in a lot of courtrooms, Peter. There are no back doors. Okay. The thing is, you all have to come through a security system. They all have security systems before you come in. There's usually one way in and one way out. So when it comes to this back door, I don't know who's dreaming of the back door. At least all the courts I have, there's one door, and you go through a security system. You don't go through the back door. So
Nick,
I'm smelling BS, and I'm smelling a lot of it. I think it's coming from
I
the
don't know
right.
why you're so strong on this issue when this time you're, over the edge.
Well, you know what?
Wait, let me finish my point. A judge has a door and is generally to walk in the courtroom from the back. We're not talking about the building's back door. We're talking about the courtroom. So a judge generally comes through the side or back of the back.
Yeah, the judge comes from the back.
Right.
That's correct.
So,
right.
So
yeah.
Again, you're trying to, the framework you're saying is partly you're arguing for the first time, Reuters is wrong, Fox News is wrong.
That's correct.
Many other reporters who are there are wrong. And
do these people ever go to court?
Video or your theory that there's no back door?
No, yeah, this is video evidence. It looks pretty strong. And the thing is, let's get real here. In all courtrooms, at least the ones I've been into, there's one way in and one way out, and that's through security. If those ICE agents wanted to arrest this person, all they had to do is sit there and wait, and they could arrest that person.
Even when the judge says,
so this is smelling really bad. It smells like it's judicial
interference. You're hypothesizing.
It smells like
facts that you have no evidence at
interference.
All right.
Judicial interference.
So this is one where we're
I'm sure the jury's going to look at the facts, and I'm sure we're going to look at it in lawyer's den because. How do you hide somebody in a courtroom? What is he going to do? Say, hey, go in my back chambers and hide underneath the chair.
You're making up facts, Nick.
Are you
the
serious?
First show ever. Nobody said that she hit anybody. She told them the facts are she told them you can't arrest them. You need to get a warrant. The facts are again by liberal.
Yeah, but the facts is they didn't show their warrant, by the way, at least according to video evidence.
Well,
if you got a warrant, man, you got to show.
Video is a very misleading thing because that can show 5 minutes or 2. How long is the video, Nick? 2 minutes?
It goes on for quite some time.
It's 5 minutes.
All the courtrooms, at least this courtroom, looked like they videotaped the whole thing. So
yeah, but how long is the videotape you watched?
Several minutes. They had several minutes.
So you're seeing several minutes of an event that was probably much longer than that because they went down the hall and there's a lot of evidence of that. You don't have all the facts, and you're just grabbing the facts that you.
Yeah, but the thing is,
those are hypothetical facts.
You're relying on Reuters and Fox has already been proven in court. As a matter of fact, they had a $700 million judgment against them for not telling the truth. And they said, hey,
Yeah,
we're
on one
entertained.
issue.
So let's get rid of Fox altogether.
Oh
Then
my
you're
gosh. All right.
relying on
Well, we're running
Reuters.
out of
Reuters
time.
wasn't
Nick,
there. So the thing is, you're relying on really poor evidence, counseling. I mean, I appreciate it, but
well, and you're saying that
pretty-
Reuters, which is very liberal, and Fox, which leans right.
No,
And,
I'm saying
and
that
all these
I'm
other
saying,
news sources have it wrong. All right,
I'm
we've got to
saying,
go.
I'm
Nick,
saying they don't have the facts,
Nick needs
command
to
of the
take less
facts.
espresso today.
So anyway, we'll have to see how this goes. And by the way, on that other case we had, Jeffrey Schwab, remember, you did a great job. I thought this was the tariffs.
Mhm.
Remember that, Peter?
Oh yeah.
I thought you won that argument. That the thing is, Trump could continue his tariffs. Unfortunately, the court, he apparently sharpened his saw because Jeffrey Schwab won the argument in front of the Court of International Trade 3-0.
Yeah,
including
lower court. And it was immediately suspended, and it's not surprising that the first court did it.
Yeah, well, it'll end up in the
called
Supreme
venue
Court.
shopping.
Yeah, it'll end up in the Supreme Court. We'll have to see where it goes
Yeah, we will
from
see
there.
where it
But
goes. All right, we've got
I
to
know
move
where
on
we're
to Wall
going.
Street Hackers.
We're out of time, and we'll see you next week on.
See you next week.
I can feel my body cold against the concrete, but I can't seem to get enough. My mind is fixed on what it wants. I just let you beat me, look at me deceiving, let you get the best of me, in bed with my worst enemy. This is a no-go, I just can't take hold. This is a danger zone, back up and get me home. This is a no-go, I just can't take hold. This is a danger zone, back up and get me. So put your hand in my...
Okay, we're going to be on Wall Street Hackers in just a minute. Give me 1 minute, and we'll get the intro set up here, and then. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wall Street Hackers on the Pod TV network. I'm Nick Palavita. I'll be your moderator for today's show, but I'm not the expert. Instead, we're going to bring in Peter Bennett, who has a bachelor's degree in economics from UCLA. He also has a law degree from the University of Miami, a master's in business administration from NYU, and spent 17 years on Wall Street. And I've spent the last couple of years taking his very good and sage advice when it comes to investing, especially in these turbulent times. So with that, none other than we're going to bring none other than the hacker himself, Peter Bennett. And Peter, I'm looking forward to your show, which I do every week because it makes a big difference in my life in terms of keeping my money as opposed to having it go down the drain. So
we have done a good job. Wall Street Hackers have been around maybe 3 years now, and we've made a lot of good calls in terms of where to put your investments, and also in terms of predicting certain things. Like for years, we're saying the Fed is way off. Everybody's off on the Fed lowering rates. And we were saying that for years, and very few people were saying that. Some were. Anyway, welcome to Wall Street Hackers, June 3rd, 2025. And you can catch a new episode most Tuesdays, shortly after Lawyers Den ends. Lawyers Den starts around 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Then we follow with Wall Street Hackers. So the markets. Uncertainty is either the ruling word today in the markets, or it should be. If you look at listen to many pundits in the press, there's a lot of uncertainty. They're concerned about tariffs. They're concerned about a lot of things, and rightly so. But if you look at the market is near its all-time high, and valuations are near historic highs, which isn't good news. And there's a lot of arguments both ways. The good news for the economy and the market is that key inflation numbers, several key inflation numbers came in really reasonable and trending in the right direction. Consumer prices rose just 2.1% in April, and nobody expected that a year ago. And that was down from 2.3% in March. And excluding food and energy, core prices rose just 2.5% from a year earlier. So these are great numbers, but there's also a lot of concerns. One, the bond market totally disagrees, or mostly disagrees, with the stock market. Today, you could still get 5% in a long-term treasury. 2-3 years ago, you could have gotten 2.5%, 2%. You would have killed for 3 or 4 if you were a bond investor. And these are in state tax-free treasuries. So the bond market is not so positive, but the stock market is. So this is creating a lot of uncertainty if you're looking at it as an investor. And also, the Fed is very reluctant to lower rates, although they are forecasting 2 rates this year. And this year, I would say I wouldn't be surprised if they're right, because I think there might be at least 1 or 2 rating decreases this year. But they're concerned about the effect of tariffs because nobody really knows the ultimate effect. I'll talk about that in a minute. But also, there's other problems. So the theme of the day is tariffs, tariffs, tariffs. There's always a theme of the day in the market, or usually, which is dominating the market. But people are also ignoring a major developing story, which is office delinquencies. The office CMBS delinquency rate, you'd have to look up CMBS, but it's basically mortgage-backed securities, is about at a 20-year high today. And everybody's ignoring this, but this could have major impacts on the financial community, on the whole market in a sense, or large parts of it. So there's mixed signals. In terms of the tariffs, I'm both strangely optimistic and pessimistic. So I think in the long run, this is great for the country. And I think that people who are pulling money out of the country, maybe selling treasuries, are likely going to be sorry. Their logic is very flawed. They think, this is going to collapse the United States or cause a weak dollar. But in a sense, the other countries were profiting from the imbalances, and now the U.S. is straightening things out. So in the long run, I'm optimistic. But in the short run, this is a time of change. And a lot of companies are going to face issues with spending money to bring back U.S. manufacturing. So it's a mixed picture. In other side news, I think that the tariffs will ultimately not be as costly. I think there'll be more of a one-time historical event over a period. Companies and consumers will adjust to maybe 10% tariffs, some places more. Lower energy prices, which have been very low recently into the Memorial weekend, will help continue inflation's drop. And in the long run, the U.S. will be strengthened by fairer tariff rules, and the dollar will probably be strengthened by it too, obviously, will be by that. So this is a day where you just have to look at the market and say, fortunately, our philosophy, Wall Street Hackers, is not even affected by this a lot, because we're not macro traders. We look at the macro in terms of how much risk to take, but in the end, we're really bottom up. We try to find companies which have a philosophy, which match our philosophy of high income or solid income, defensive balance sheets, and the companies have to have high cash flows that are backing it up, and in generally defensive sectors. So we just keep putting out our investments and keep our portfolio modified sometimes for the macro picture. But in general, we go with the long-term studies that show that dividend investors, investing REITs, MLPs, energy are the long-term places to be. So 2 quotes of the week, and one really seems very right and one seemed very wrong to Wall Street Hackers. So the first quote, they're both from this weekend's Barron's June 2nd issue. Quote 1, which I think was basically right. Fears of tariff-induced inflation have failed to be realized. The personal consumption expenditure price index, the Federal Reserve's favored metric, slipped in April, while consumer confidence is picking up. So again, I expect some effect of the tariffs, and the market's probably optimistic in the short run. But that's what's happening so far. It hasn't been that bad. Now the misunderstanding. Trump's one big, beautiful bill passed the House and now awaits the Senate. If approved, it would increase the deficit to about 125% of the economy output, which would, according to traditional thinking, hobble the U.S. with economic problems and financial risks, especially, they're saying, if the tariffs fail to produce. So I don't know I almost don't know what they mean by traditional thinking, but my thinking is very different. Here's why there's too much panic over the tariffs in the long run, but again, in the short run, I think they will have more effect. So I'm on both sides in terms of where the market is thinking. So first of all, the CBOE, the Congressional Budget Office, CBO, calculates the effects of budget bills using very inaccurate and antiquated methods. And it has been very wrong often. So it's not, even though the press goes, oh, the CBO says this is going to raise the deficit a lot, it's not even looking at things in a realistic way. The second point is, when they look at the tax bill, and this is a perfect example, they're including the tax cuts as an expense, but they've been enacted years ago. And even then, the CBO said, oh, this is going to cost the government revenue. And the history, which I said years ago, and I say again, is there's a strong history under Kennedy, Reagan, and now Trump, that first term, that when tax cuts came, if they were structured well, and they were under those three, it actually increased revenues because it stimulated the economy in a healthy way. Another point is the bill does include large cuts in spending. Now, these are nowhere near what we need to do for the deficit, but it includes a lot of cuts. And if you're scoring it correctly, you look more positively at the cuts than a continuing tax cut that isn't really changing much. There will be adjustments. And so the final thing is the CBO isn't even allowed under their own rules to consider other effects, possibly lower energy prices, definitely deregulation, and income from the tariffs. So all these numbers are so far off, but that's the theme of the day. The tariffs are a big threat, but the market now seems to be ignoring it, at least the stock market to a good extent. Most interesting stories of the week. This one replaced the other one because it came out. It was really a surprising story. Ukrainian forces stunned the Russian military Sunday after wiping out and damaging dozens of nuclear bombers and other aircraft with attacks that struck President Vladimir Putin's air bases deep inside Russia. Pro-Moscow military bloggers are calling the strike, which used drones hidden in trucks, new warfare, the Russian Pearl Harbor. According to Ukrainian officials, this cost Russia at least $7 billion in damages. And they claim, and whether or not it's accurate, who knows, but they did just do a lot of damage. They had destroyed about 1/3 of Russia's strategic bombers in the strike. Two key points. One, this is the new face of international warfare. I've been saying this for a while, that everything was big, but smaller attack units are going to be the way of the future. Even the drones will probably shrink in terms of size, and we'll have smaller and smaller weapons that can do more and more damage. And electronic equipment is also the way of the future in terms of international warfare. The other point I've been making over and over again, President Trump definitely has to push more pressure on Putin. He should be pressured in terms of what's been happening, but he doesn't seem to be threatened at all. We've been saying for 2 months now, and I think President Trump is realizing how unserious Putin is, that Trump needs to pressure both sides. But in terms of Putin, he needs to say, look, if you don't create peace and a ceasefire, and there aren't fair terms from your side, we're going to increase our military budget 10 to 15% every 2 months forever. This is the kind of pressure that Reagan used to bring down the Berlin Wall. The USSR back then could not afford to keep up with the space race and what they call Star Wars, but now which is called defense domes. So this is a good tactic, and hopefully we'll try it. Why President Trump should give me a call. In January, I completed a 30-page segment. In January, I actually did a 30-page report which focused on major savings, a lot of unknown ideas or little known ideas, and it focused on Medicare and Social Security, but especially Medicare. So the thing is, and I sent it out, about 23 copies to key senators, House, a couple of people in the White House, a few people in the Trump family, but not a response. Maybe it needs editing. I'm going to re-edit it, whatever. But it was a pretty darn good report and very substantial. So the thing is, it focused on the $125 trillion the U.S. government owes, not the $37 trillion we're approaching now. It's not 36 anymore. We're getting close to 37, but it's $125 trillion because we have unfunded liabilities that are going to come due, maybe in 7 years, roughly, because these funds are going to run out. And then the country's going to be like, what happened? So we need to start acting seriously on this. And you say, okay, Doge cut into things. Well, Elon Musk made a good effort. But he had said $2 trillion in savings, and they came up with about 170 billion, basically a tenth of less than a tenth of what was promised. So yeah, they can make dents in certain areas, and there's plenty more waste, I'm sure, to cut. Government has become very bloated, and there will be rescission bills in Congress, which will cut more. But you're not going to solve all the problem unless you start doing everything you can to cut the debt and the obligations. And there are a lot of things with Medicare and yield curve control and other things that are going to be necessary in order for us to not become an inflation capital, basically. So we'll see what happens. Okay, moving on to more practical things for investors. Dividend investment of the week. Our disclaimers: Wall Street Hackers is for entertainment only. Consult your financial advisor. These are only our opinions. There's no guarantee on any suggestions, and that's true of all financial shows, really. A treasury is semi-guaranteed, or a CD, but even that's subject to inflation. So this week, we're going with a small allocation, and I'll explain that why in a minute. But it's SRRTF, Slate Grocery REIT. And I like this for a number of years, and it did very well. But the main reason why I don't have more allocation in SRRTF is because I just love long-term high coupon treasuries, not just long-term, but high coupon treasuries at around 5%, because any scenario I win, I get 5%, which is the expected return of the market by JP Morgan and Goldman, which said 3 to 6% in the next 10 years. So get a decent return, especially in an IRA or a Roth IRA or 401k if you can control it. I like these kind of long-term fixed rates, and that's for safety. But then the balance is MPLX, the only investment I really love in the market, and I've loved it for years. I liked it at 12, I liked it at 20, I liked it at 30, I liked it at 40. I like it today around 51 something. It's been paying huge dividends, and I see no change in the trend. I will talk about MPLX next week. But why do I like SRTF? And footnote, I do hold SRTF in an IRA because it's a Canadian REIT, but it owns U.S. real estate, which is unusual itself. There's at least one more, but SRRTF, that is, by the way, there's an R missing on the screen. But it owns grocery-anchored shopping centers in the U.S. So I think grocery-oriented shopping centers are one of the safest places you could possibly be, because people need to eat. And I don't think that's changing in terms of, buying online or anything like that. And besides that, a lot of the Amazons and other online sellers are just using the groceries as their base to send it out anyway. So I think it's one of the safest sectors if you're in the right place. It has an 8% dividend, and it's covering its dividend payout already with its FIFO for cash flows. So cash flows are healthy. And if you look at the fundamentals, first of all, shopping center fundamentals are tremendous because they're not building a whole lot of shopping centers in the United States at all. And there's very low vacancy rates in shopping centers, especially grocery-oriented shopping centers. So this is really a positive sector. Also, if you look at their Q1 update, and I love Slate for years, but a small allocation now, it's outperformed the competition. It lists it on their presentation. If you go there, that's always the great source. Go to the company's presentations and financials, go to the original source. That's one of the first things I learned on Wall Street from my first mentor. So the original source is their presentation, and it says they have outperformed other REITs, and they list many over 1, 3, and 5 years. They were actually the number one performer on the list over 1 year. Very healthy returns. And along the way, you're getting 8, 9, 10% dividends. It's up a bit now, but you're still getting 8. So the final thing is they argue, and I think it's true, that their rents are so much lower than the market. So they've been raising them, but they're much lower than the competition and lower than market rates. So they have, as these leases come due, they're going to have a lot of leeway to raise the rates. So as a smaller allocation, if not for MPLX and high coupon bonds right now, I'd probably be a much larger allocation, especially in my IRA. But it seems like a solid investment for part of a portfolio. So that's it. And we're going to go to the panel discussion of the week. Nick? Hey, Nick.
I'm here.
Well, hello to beautiful Tampa, as we saw before. So first, I'll give a little background and the topic. So many news sources are now in the mainstream media are now speaking about how they were, quote, misled by the White House or people in the White House, and they should have, quote, realized that President Biden had at least some cognitive decline. The question will be, and then I'll give the background, is it the Democratic Party who was misleading the mainstream media, or the mainstream media misleading the Democratic Party on this topic of Biden's decline? So background, and I was surprised by this, but a Secret Service whistleblower just claimed that former President Biden was so out of it at the White House that he would get, quote, get lost in his closet. That is pretty bad. I see Nick smiling. Senator Josh Hawley said the stunning level of disorientation is an example of why the Democratic cover of Biden's mental decline is one of the biggest scandals in presidential history. It is a footnote. It is a pretty big scandal. You have a president, if it all comes out and it's all true, which it looks like. But Hawley said this Secret Service whistleblower actually was assigned to Biden. And he, quote, told me that Biden used to get lost in his closet in the mornings at the White House. Hawley also said this is outrageous. We were lied to. And Hawley said he also has spoken to numerous other Secret Service agents who have backed up the story. So it's not like one guy saying, you know, it was Biden. So going further in the background, this raises a number of issues. And there are now ongoing investigations, which will keep setting out all kind of news stories. One, creating one, who was actually running the country, especially if this is true, and it looks like it could be. Two, who had control of the auto pen that signed President Biden's signature by machine. Anybody could have been using it. And this was for numerous executive orders and actions. Who controlled the pen when it issued blank pardons for many people? We're talking about 8,000 pardons that were done by auto pen. And it included the final pardons for many members of the Biden family who were accused of financial improprieties. And there was some evidence of that too, especially Hunter Biden, but everybody's pardoned by the auto pen, which could also make it invalid, by the way. And also there were pardons for future actions, which is likely legally impossible. That's a subject for lawyers then, but that could be next week. But I don't even know if there's an argument there. How can you pardon somebody for something they're going to do? Okay, you're going to steal something, or you're going to commit this crime, so we'll pardon you now. Go ahead and do it. It doesn't seem like that's a solid legal foundation. So the pros and Democrats for years have been making up these stories. And then we're going to get to the question, which is, Trump is a Russian surrogate or a spy. They were saying Biden was in perfect mental shape. The people were conspiring to say he wasn't. Trump had no right to ask why Hunter Biden received $5 million around the time that Vice President Biden at that time said, if you don't fire the prosecutor who's going after Burisma, who paid the $5 million, we're going to hold back U.S. funds. So they fired the prosecutor going after Burisma, who paid Biden's son $5 million. They said Hunter laptops was, again, a Russian conspiracy. They said the border could never be controlled without congressional action, except for it was controlled in about a week once by the president. They said, president can't do that. He needs Congress's help. So all these stories, you'd think that people would be even more skeptical of the media. So Nick, is it the Democrats leading the press or the press leading the Democrats?
Yes, it is. Okay. I mean, the thing is, I think you have a lot of blame to shift around. It's really hard to listen to media today, Peter, because when I listen to CNN and MSNBC, I get slanted left so far that I just go, I can't listen to them anymore, because they won't just report the facts. They'll put the facts and then they'll add their opinions to it on every time. And the thing is, it's just very difficult. Now, when it comes to Joe Biden's decline, which is the issue, there was something that was non-transparent there. It was obvious, but unfortunately, they could not, when he came up through the debate, support the position that he was okay. You know, he obviously had some faculty issues, because remember, he started making things up, and even Donald Trump was going, what are you saying? But the whole world was looking at him, feeling sorry.
They couldn't hide it anymore, that's for sure.
You can't ignore it anymore. In other words, it's impossible. So the real question is, how much cover up took place prior to that? And it's going to take a lot of digging to find out. But obviously, that administration was not transparent at all.
Oh, yeah.
I gotta tell you.
A few points. One, I agree. MSNBC is totally psychotic.
I can't watch MSNBC anymore. I don't even know where they come up with.
CNN leans so heavy, but it's not just them. CBS, NBC particularly, ABC. They're so slanted left. They don't separate. They do two things. They don't separate opinion from fact. And I don't mind it, you know, if you have an opinion, but make it clear that it's your opinion. Don't separate it. And also they, you know, I mean, studies show that they're reporting something like 92% negative on President Trump, and I'm not sure about the other 8% is even positive. But the thing is, you have to separate opinion from fact, one, and two, you have to report positive stories, or at least give some other sides to the story, especially against ABC and CNN. But the cover up, I mean, this is an amazing story, but it was kind of a trick question, and you didn't fall for it in a sense. And I'll tell you why. Because there was no easy answer. Because my theory is it's a virtual cycle. And the cycle is this. If you're a liberal, and this makes sense, or if you're a conservative, you tend to go to the news sources that support what you believe. So if you're a Democrat, you go to the liberal news sources, and this pushes someone off the deep end, because they sometimes take these positions that MSNBC pushes. So, but the thing is, so this is the cycle. The Democrats, or liberals, I should say, because not all Democrats are liberals, although there aren't many moderates left, and certainly the direction has been more towards the progressive side. They watch the liberal press, and then they repeated things, and then so the information comes from the Democrat Party, and then it gets exaggerated, and then it gets repeated. So, and then the press picks it up, and it goes on round and round and round between the two parties. But there's not enough looking at, you know, analysis of, you know, are we even right on this, or, you know, what's the other side? And again, it's human nature to look to avoid sources of information that disagree with you, because you're dug in on your position. This is true whether you're right or wrong on all positions. It's human nature. I read a really interesting book on that. But so this cycle, the other point is, it's not good for the Democratic Party, and it's not good for the country either. I mean, the Democratic Party seems to be moving even further to the left towards the progressives. I mean, and we're talking about socialists and people who have some sort of unpopular ideas, to say the least. And this isn't good for the country, because ideally, you have two functioning parties. They can challenge each other in intelligent manners. And so it's doing damage to the Democrats. It's dividing the country, because you have two realities. And I hope eventually, as the shrinking ratings of the mainstream media continue, because they are dropping, especially MSNBC and CNN, they're dropping like a rock, and they have been for a long time now. People just realize, wait a minute, you lied to me. How many times am I going to start believing you? And also, if I look anywhere else, I see, wait, you're not giving me the whole story. So hopefully media will balance itself out better. MSNBC will probably be sold, and I think they're going to be changed, maybe dramatically, because they do care. The next owner will care about ratings, because they're going to pay for it. So in the long run, the truth will set you free. And in this case, hopefully the truth will balance everything out in the long run in terms of the media and the Democratic Party, and we'll have a functioning democracy, hopefully. So thanks for watching Wall Street Hackers. We will be on next week with Lawyers Den around 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and followed by Wall Street Hackers around 6:15. As Kim always says, get healthy and get wealthy. It's one of my favorite expressions. And we'll see you soon. See you next week. Enjoy Tampa Day.
Bye-bye.